Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of In Focus, and today we've got with us Sam Bramwell, who is CEO of a new consultancy based in the Northeast called Marra. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. Sam, I'll start off with the question we start with everyone. What's the most, in your opinion, interesting or exciting thing about working in tech at the moment?
Gosh, so many. I think it's the innovation that's happening in tech at the moment. I'm really excited around the whole chat, GPT, AI, natural language, and machine learning. I think that has the power, if it's used properly, to really improve lives and what have you. So I'm very excited about that currently.
Good. Are you experimenting with that yourselves over
We
there, or
are.
at what
We
stage?
so we have been, I mean, more so from a research and learning perspective, but
Mm,
we're also thinking about, how would this integrate into applications or data or kind of automation from a work process. So
mhm.
yeah, so we've been playing and we've had our trainees sort of playing with it, but we're also looking at it actually holistically. How would it be introduced into a customer, for example?
Yeah, it is fascinating, and I think I was talking to somebody about this at one of our roundtables yesterday, where it's the first time there's been such a advancement in technology, which isn't uncommon. You know, when the internet first came about, and when mobile phones and Wi-Fi and stuff like that. I think this is the first time it's been as accessible to as many people as it has been,
Yeah.
which I think has made a real difference in, I suppose, the perception of what that technology is capable of as well. Because it's no longer just the techies that are sort of accessing this; it's everyone.
And this is my big fundamental belief and part of Mara's fundamental belief, right? That technology should serve the needs of everybody. The biggest thing when I was working at Microsoft, the big thing was always not what technology could do, but what it should do, because there's an
Mm,
ethical element, I think, to all of this, as we've seen with some of the people trying to fox it or break it or have different kind of conversations. But
mm.
I use it with my daughter. So my daughter's taking her GCSEs at the moment, and actually it's helped her to structure her paragraphs,
Wow.
it, and helped her to learn a little bit about how she gets better as a student. So yeah,
Hmm.
I hope it will be a part of things that we will augment the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's always going to be, with technology, unfortunately, we're in a world these days where there will be people that look to get the worst out of it. But as long as we massively outweigh the good with the bad, then I think we're on the right track with this
Yeah.
type of thing. We'll come on to Mara shortly, but I suppose take us back, Sam, for those that are listening and watching that don't know you. Start us off, I suppose, with your background and how you got into digital and tech in the first place, and I suppose how that got you to where you are today.
So I've been working in tech for 25 years, which means I must have started when I was three, clearly. No, I was I've always loved technology, but I'm not a technologist. And I'll give you a bit of my background. So when I was about 10, I wanted to be an astronaut. I adore space. I just think that this kind of thing that we're in, this universe, is amazing, and I've always been interested in how it works. At the age of 14, I wanted to study physics and was told I couldn't because I was a girl,
Oh,
and
really?
had a really poor experience. So that pushed me down a path to study English and performing arts, actually. Then traveled the world, fell into a job because I had to pay the Visa card bill, and I ended up working in a tech company, and I realized I absolutely loved it. I loved and it comes back down to one of the things I'm passionate about technology is how it can really help people.
Mm,
And so I started working for a financial software organization, then moved to Ireland and started working in technology startups over there, sort of telecoms bubble. And I've been so lucky to be in a part of what I call the revolution of tech, from
mm.
sort of internet era, mobile internet, now into cloud, now into kind of AI. So I just, for me, it's all about how it can really solve the problems, particularly the ones we're facing now in the world. And yeah, it's just a great place to be. I love being at the really pointy end of innovation. It's really exciting when you see great talent and brains kind of trying to solve some of the biggest challenges that we face.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned right at the start there, which I think is a really critical point for a lot of people looking to get into digital and tech, is that you don't have to be a techie person to be able to do that. You know, I still think there's far too much of a stereotype of, if I work in tech, I'm sat in front of a computer and I'm writing code on a black screen and the text is green and all of that type of stuff. And I think, you know, the realization that that is one role in a technology team, but there's so many others that support it.
100%, as when you're so right. I think that there is this concept everyone's got to be a coder. I think it's important, if you're passionate about technology, understand it, but you don't need to code to understand it. You just need to be able to grasp the concepts. And actually, what we're trying to do is ensure that technology, as I said, augments the human experience or a business experience and improves it. And what you really need is a really great understanding of people. You know, digital transformation projects fail because people aren't on that journey. Or, you know, so it's about bringing these two parts of our world together, humanity and tech together. But you don't need, you know, there are so many starting points and entry points. I started off in marketing, for example, and I'm just, you know, I'm naturally inquisitive, so I wanted to know how things work. And there's so many areas to work in, from project manager, from UX. There's a huge range, and really, yeah, you can start anywhere. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And would you say then, coming on to starting or the idea to form Marra and starting this journey, was sort of in some way founded in that, you know, need to want to make sure tech was helping people, not necessarily always on just on the receiving end of, you know, the user, but also the people that are in tech? Because hopefully you won't mind me saying you were very high up in Microsoft in your, you know, previous career. So it'd be great to get an insight into, you know, what sort of got you over to this side of things.
So there's a number of things. You're right. I mean, you know, in that 25-year career, I spent 15 years of it at Microsoft in a range of different roles and had really a wonderful experience there. But what I also began to see and observe was that, you know, often I was the only woman in the room, and the diversity of people that we need to create technology was just not there. And, you know, that I think limits our experience of technology and people's experience as a user. As part of my career development at Microsoft, I took on becoming the chair of the Women at Microsoft Network in the UK and co-chair globally. And that really began to that, along with the experiences I've had actually as a woman in technology, made me realize that we wanted to do more. And I felt the time was now to start to drive more of a cultural revolution in the world of technology. You know, we want this to last forever, you know, as long as the kind of financial services sector has, and it has the ability to do that, but it has to transform. And now, with the tech skills shortage we have, the diversity deficit has been around for decades, and we have not done enough about it because we haven't had to. We now have to. And so really Marra came out of that need to, you know, to enable technology to meet everyone's needs by ensuring that the people that were creating it represent society, essentially. And part of that thinking for me was driven very much from the pandemic. We as a society and around the world, councils and governments shifted everything digitally, but they disconnected a whole bunch of people who weren't digitally connected, like older people in society. And what often happens in, you know, in big firms is you've got people who who went to the same schools, have a similar experience in life, and have never experienced what it means to sign on, to maybe be a single parent, or to have different life experiences. And we have to address that in the tech sector now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've given us some insight there, but how would you describe, you know, for anyone that is unfamiliar with Marra, who are you and what do you do?
Who are we and what do we do? So let me start with our name, right? So if you're the name Marra is a Cumbrian term. It's the term for mate, and it comes from our desire to kind of effectively make the technology industry a really friendly, supportive industry to be in. But we're a technology services company. We were founded last year in 2022, with women led. And we also have a really strong social purpose. And we're effectively on a mission to change the face of technology for good by tackling the barriers to work that women and people from other minority groups face in the tech industry, the culture void and the diversity deficit and the skills shortage. I've talked a bit about that sort of passion we have around believing that technology needs to meet the needs of everybody, and it's got the power to enrich lives. And that for us is really that kind of driving factor, if you like. So, you know, and I think we're really kind of uniquely placed to lead that cultural revolution. But we're not just about kind of driving a cultural revolution. We're hiring and reskilling women and men from a range of different backgrounds to turn them into power platform app makers, leveraging low code, because it's a real opportunity, because it represents a lower barrier to entry and a shallower learning curve into technology. And then we're also focused on fixing the systems that hold people back. So, for example, addressing the issues and the barriers that people face in the workplace. For example, women and mums, right, who need to care for their kids. And so we've disrupted the 9 to 5 by coming up with a different working model for those people.
Oh, brilliant. Can you expand on that to give us an insight on sort of how the different working models or examples of how those different working models are coming through?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the feedback that women give in any survey is the lack of part-time working. And often women are forced down a part-time working route because of their childcare needs. So we ask that people do something called core hours. We have a 37.5-hour week. And the idea is that we have a hybrid working model. So everybody actually comes into the office from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and they can work between 10 and 2 in what we call our core hours. So that's very focused around either team or client. And then outside of that, we call it deep work time. So they can work flexibly around those hours. And that allows us to enable people to do alone time work. And they can also have meetings and what have you if they want to. But what we're not saying to people is you've got to be in the office at 9 o'clock in the morning on a call with a customer, or unless your schedule supports that. And what's been really interesting is that all of the working parents have opted to have flexibility, which has been really lovely, because we've enabled that, and we're not frowning upon it. And we're not holding people's careers back as a result of it. Interestingly as well, because we're offering this flexibility, we've had some of our women say, well, I don't have to choose part-time now. I can work full-time and I can still pick up my kids or drop them off. I'm not having to compromise. And so hopefully through that model, we can bring more people along on the journey of flexibility. Some may argue that we're not offering true flexibility, but hopefully, I think by bringing people together and having these core hours, it allows us to focus on the customer in certain times and on our culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I fully agree with you in terms of the sort of outputs that you're getting and the feedback you're getting being overwhelmingly positive. But it's no surprise from what you're describing. I think the element of flexibility as well, we're finding more and more, or I'm hearing more and more, is you can't have one policy and just keep it as that for the rest of the time the company is in existence, because people change, things change, environments change, you know, people's personal situations change. So there's a large element of job personalization that goes on with it as well, which then I imagine as an employer and an employee sort of adds to that value proposition and that sense of belonging, and that people actually care about you as opposed to you being a number on a sheet.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And I think that, you know, we're all feeling our way through this hybrid remote working model. What was really important for Marra was the creation of culture. And I think, you know, there are organizations that are doing it successfully remotely, but we're, you know, remembering that we're training people, some who may not have worked in an office before, certainly haven't worked in technology before. So being able to bring them together, they are mentored. We hire in cohorts. So we have a cohort of 12. And part of that cohort are trainees and part are experienced technologists. And the mentoring and coaching that goes in training people and supporting them is really important. So having the hybrid model where everyone's in the office on the same days and then works remotely on the same days helps us to create the culture and the togetherness, the psychological safety and the trust that's required for us to build this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we've spoke before, Sam, you mentioned how that initial period is structured, and you guys do things slightly differently in the first 4 weeks. There's a very different approach to what I've heard before. I'm purposely not giving too many details away, so you can.
Yeah, so we look at, we've got sort of three pillars of training, if you like. It's about, culture, D&I, and a lot of self-awareness, a lot of what I call unlearning and relearning about
Mm,
ourselves. There's a big focus on consultancy skills and technology. Most
mhm,
organizations will focus mostly on technology, maybe with a bit of consultancy learning as well. But
mhm,
we deliberately don't touch the technology for a good few weeks, and we really focus in on making sure that people feel they're part of a team. The first week is around diversity and inclusion. We do a lot around bias.
mhm,
We do things called the Manual of Me, where people talk a bit about what they need to feel safe in the organization. We talk about the trust
mhm,
equation. So it's really about getting people to unlock themselves, because, as a leader, I fundamentally believe we've got to understand what motivates people. And
mhm,
actually, if you look at any sort of psychology, people bring baggage in, right, from their childhood and all those things, and that sometimes makes them behave in certain ways, and I have to understand that. So we try to get to the nub of each person, and that creates then hopefully a sense of culture, trust, and togetherness and belonging. And that for me is a core thing around culture. It's not just
mm.
about diversity, it's not just about inclusion, it's that sense of belonging and togetherness that we're trying to drive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that has done and will do, and I mean, tell me from your experience, like reduce things like staff attrition because, people understand each other. And there's less things that are, the problems can occur from as much as the things that are said as also are not said, you know,
Well,
on the
I
other
mean,
side.
you're right, and I hope it will over time. I mean, we're still early days in around
Mm,
retention and what have you. uh, but we also do a lot around kind of getting feedback from people. So we adjusted the training based on people's needs.
mm,
We're encouraging people to feel safe and to give feedback. So feedback is a really, people always see feedback as a scary thing. It doesn't need to be. It's a really important part of growing, as an
mhm,
organization, as an individual, if it's done in the right way. And so we try to help people to think about how they do it in the right way. And one of our values is "Have you got a sec?", which is literally, "If you've got a second, I'd just like to talk to you about something," in
mhm.
any shape or form. And it's just about enabling that space to happen.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think the more companies that normalize things like feedback and it not being, oh, I'm about to get a kick in for something, the better, really. It leads to happier workplaces. We mentioned diversity there. In your opinion, Sam, what does it really mean to diversify digital and tech and that landscape?
Uh, I think, it's about bringing people together from different walks of life, from different backgrounds. If you look in technology over the last 20, 30 years, it's what I call a homogenous group of people. They will have gone to, I think 87% of people working in tech have a degree. And that's not to bash anyone with a degree, because, they're needed and what
Mm,
have you. They may have gone to certain schools, may have gone to a certain university, and then you get this homogenous thinking, right? They haven't got all the life experiences we need. And if we so for me, diversity in tech, or diversifying tech, is about bringing people in who can help
mhm,
make tech great. And I think it's really important when we think about technology in governments, where it's serving every citizen, and even technology in the financial sector where it's serving people. You've got to really think about who you're bringing in to help create it, so you can think about that kind of end-to-end experience of the end user in some way. But it's
mhm,
also about challenging things like bias in technology. We've all heard the stories around algorithms that won't read certain minority groups faces, or they
mhm,
won't listen to a women's voice, or actually it's women's voices on Siri and what have you. So it's all
mhm.
about challenging those things, because then we break out the gender stereotypes that we have in society, and I think that can only improve what we're doing from a technology perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And why do you think companies, I don't want to say companies struggle with this, but let's be honest, the tech landscape is not diverse. and it's got a long way to go. What do you think stops existing organizations, from being more diverse? If you could pick, the biggest common reason.
I talk a lot about the barriers to work. It's a really great question,
Mm,
by the way, Isman, so thank you for asking it. I talk a lot about the barriers to work, and there's loads and loads of research that articulates what those are. But let's just talk about women for a second, because
mm,
the barriers to work exist for other minority groups.
mhm.
But with women representing 50% of society, let's kind of start there.
Sure.
It is culture. So what does that, we talk about toxic cultures, but the microaggressions, discrimination, the issue whereby if a woman does work part-time, she's seen as less than, and that she's not
Mm,
serious about her career. And so it's there's a whole smorgasbord of issues, the issue, I think, in a lot of big tech firms is it's hard to fix. So
mhm,
I've had the privilege of working at Microsoft for 15 years, 10 of those years working for Satya Nadella, who's done an amazing job in trying to drive cultural change. But
mhm,
that has not happened overnight. It's little bits of work every single day and every single year. And most
mhm,
tech firms, most big firms won't go on that journey. They also have to change their business models. They have to invest in people. And I just think that's part of the challenge. They just won't get on that horse. Um,
mhm,
we also have, I think the other part of it is we have to encourage people um, into technology by exciting them about the jobs that exist.
mm,
Often I have children there, 13 and 15, and I would not be excited about technology based on the curriculum that's being taught in schools. We have
mm,
to tell them actually that technology is what's going to solve the future problems around climate crisis and poverty,
mhm.
and all those things, and excite them about the jobs they could come and do and the skills they need to go and do that.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I think, that's evident in seeing, again, this is, I feel like I say this quite a lot. I've got nothing against with anyone with a degree. I have a computer science degree and I'm a recruiter. But I think we see a real diversity in people that are going to alternatives other than going to university, apprenticeships, working, learning on the job, prospects like yourself, boot camps,
Yeah,
just doing the courses on Udemy and just applying to things,
yeah,
and going for it, and I think that's great to see, because it, like you said earlier, it's the richness of thought you get from a diverse range of people. You're guaranteed to hear something that you wouldn't have thought about, and that will ultimately make a better product, a better service, a better whatever it is that you're doing.
I agree. And you know what, I also think that when you get people that come from a range of different backgrounds, depending on where they've come from, they also want to help fix the communities they've come from.
Mm,
I really I see that an awful lot, particularly in inner cities where they want to kind of give back, and support people more. So the more we can do that as well, then you get this kind of this beauty, I think, happening in the kind of world of technology. And you're right, apprenticeships, all of the options that are available to people mean that, and things like low code as well, actually mean that it's an
mm.
easier learning journey. We have a wonderful guy on our course. He was a musician, and
Wow.
he decided he was a jazz musician, and he's in a band. He's in a really good band as well, actually. I'll plug the band. But
We'll post the link.
yeah, absolutely. But he was thinking that maybe tech had passed him by, right? He
Mm,
thought that he couldn't go on that journey, and so he started to do some coding courses, and now he's an app maker, and he's brilliant. He's really, really good. He brings a different perspective into what we do. We've got a doctor, a junior doctor. She just burnt out during the pandemic, and
mhm.
she's now learning to code. And but she's bringing industry knowledge and that richness of her experience that she can provide to hopefully our clients in the future. So yeah, I think, and we should just be accepting and embracing of people coming into the industry and not thinking they've got to hit this high bar of having a degree and a master's, and also then encouraging them to do that if they want to, if
Mm.
they step into it, enabling people to keep learning and training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the coming on to the, I hate using this phrase, but I'll say it, the war on talent, and the skills shortage. There is a shift, and it's refreshing to see. We're seeing more of a shift of hiring based on your problem solving skills, your approach to work, your ability to engage other human beings and, logically think, nothing to do with technology, or partly possibly, because the pace of technology change is so quick. What you know now may be out of date in 6 months anyway, and you're going to have to learn something else then, which is good to see, because that, I think, opens the door to, again, people that may be returning to work, the over 50s who apparently, don't want to work anymore and that type of thing. But actually, we're seeing a lot more examples of, well, actually, yeah, I can do this because I've learned that, well, okay, I'm not a coder, but I've learned what UX research is, and that's a vital part of technology, which not working in the industry would never have had a clue about. So I think that's got to be critical on a lot of companies' agendas, because otherwise we can't just keep paying people more money, because where does the money come from?
Well, and that's it. And what you get then is a two-tier system. So, and this really hurts government, right? They cannot afford to pay the wages the private sector pays. They're now making decisions on supporting low code, so they can bring in people and then train them up and build their platforms on low code, because they can't compete. There was a stat I learned the other day, I can't remember where it's from, but it said that 80% of the 2030 workforce are already working.
Wow.
So when you think about that and you realize that, I think last year there was a stat I saw as well, there was nearly close to 1 million vacancies in Q2 of 2022 in the tech industry. And you're like, well, that we can't, it's like squares and round holes, pegs and round holes, or whatever they say. And, it just can't go together. So you have to look at reskilling, and you have to look at how the big tech firms are now investing in low code and other things to make it easier for people to code. It doesn't mean we don't need really smart coders. These two things should work together, relationship, but it means we need to bring more people in, and we have to find different pathways for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think there's also an appetite for acceptable levels of innovation, is what I'd refer to it as. Because I think sometimes low code and no code platforms have a stigma of, oh, it's not really development, or oh, the product is going to be inferior. But actually, does it need to be hand coded from scratch to do what you want it to do? Absolutely not.
No, and actually, we know that often hand coding it, I like that word, it's like a hand making a cake, takes longer, right? It does take longer, it's more costly. We have to think about the innovation as a UK economy, all up, and we've got to find ways of getting there faster, right? We've got challenges from a GDP perspective and all of those things. So how do we get there faster and use the tools that are available to us, and stop looking for perfection? Sometimes I've been in tech meetings where they're looking for the perfect solution, or it's got to be created in such a way, and it becomes too academic at times. And what we've got to think about is actually, it's just the experience. What are you trying to drive from an outcome perspective? And we can sometimes lose sight of that. And so I do agree with you. It should be just good enough. No one's perfect. Perfectionism doesn't even exist. So nothing's ever going to be perfect, and it will be obsolete by the time you've deployed it if you're not careful. And that's why you've got to think about an agile way to get stuff out into the hands of people, adopting it, using it, and then growing it from there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it reminds me of a conversation I was having earlier about transformation programs and whether they ever end. And well, technically, no, they don't. Is the widely accepted view now. However, there was a time where it was like, well, it's a 3-year transformation. It's almost like, well, at the 3-year mark, all of a sudden, everything's done. Yeah.
Or not done, as the case may be in some projects that I've worked in. I think you're absolutely right. It's a bit like, people will go on a business transformation program, it used to be called, right, probably about 10, 15 years ago, and thought they could do a few things, and then suddenly the culture would change and everyone would shift. I think that Microsoft has proven that's not ever true. Diversity is a journey. Everything's a journey. And we have to look at it and accept it like that, and just embrace what comes through, and think about, I always talk about growth mindset and learning and being inquisitive, thinking about how you adopt and adapt what's kind of coming down the line, rather than kind of fearing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And while we're talking about, we mentioned earlier, looking at women in tech and gender balancing the workforce. The stat that constantly goes around is it's somewhere between 13 and 14% of women work in some form of technology. And it's been like that pretty much ever since I've been in recruitment, which is over 12 years. So it's not really changing. I think I looked it up earlier. I think around the world, roughly the same percentage of women are founders of things as well. So there's not really an up or a downward curve from that perspective either. I mean, you mentioned things like women in tech networks and female founders networks. How important do you think those activities in those groups are to supporting, getting more women into tech, or enabling more women to believe that, well, yes, I can found something?
They're hugely important. So, just in terms of running communities at Microsoft, I think they give women a space where they can feel safe and share experience, because and know that they're not alone, because sometimes there are only women on a team and they can feel they're alone in that experience of being a woman in technology. But there are also places where they can get mentorship and support. So some of the barriers I spoke about, often that's around a lack of mentors, a lack of sponsors, but a lack of role models. And that often happens in other minority groups. And we have women coming in who, maybe from a different ethnic minority group, and then, well, there's nobody who looks like me. So actually, what's my lived experience like here? And so I think that those spaces allow women to identify, and when I say women, I mean women, people who identify as women and non-binary people as well. They allow people to kind of come together and share that experience and help and support each other. We talk about ladders in diversity, about throwing the ladder down, not pulling it up. And I think that becomes really important. There's another worrying statistic. I mean, I think this is partly, it really saddens me. I think this came from a report that maybe Accenture and Girls Code First did a year ago, but 50% of women under the age of 35 will leave their technology roles. So,
Really?
you can increase the amount of women coming in, but if you're not fixing the experience that they're having, to fix them, you're not fixing that experience, you're not improving parental leave, you're not improving childcare, these women are just going to leave because they can't do, as much as we like to say we can do it all, actually, if all the pressure's on us, we can't. We have to have partnerships to support us, and that comes from the organization as well as our physical partners in the personal world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great point as well, because I think often the focus is on we need to hire more women, we need to hire more underrepresented backgrounds, but you need to keep them as well. And there's still things, that sadly are around about, well, if I go on maternity leave, will my job still be here when I come back? Or, will I be overlooked for things and that type of stuff? Will I be seen as like, oh, there's that person that went away for 6, 9, 12 months and now they're back?
Absolutely. There's lots of horror stories where I think there's some statistics that say, once you've taken maternity leave, it has a 10-year impact on the salary. I was very fortunate. I was in a wonderful company when I took mat leave the second time around. First time around, my job was taken away from me.
Really?
It was given to another person whilst I was on maternity leave. And, I was too kind of baby brained at that point to even kind of, I was like, what's going on? But second time around, I was in Microsoft and it never impacted me. I was really, really supported and lucky. But so many women, that people are not able to understand that actually we can do both things. With the right support. And actually, we also need to reframe the conversation a little bit, which is it's not just women who are parents. Their partners are as well, whether they're male or female. They are also partners, and we have to start thinking about how the sharing of childcare works in this country. I think improving parental leave and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think balance is a wonderful thing that I think if we could achieve balance in all parts of our life, the world would probably be a better place, and that includes balance at work. It's like, yes, I come to work and I get paid money to do this work, but it's not about that anymore. It's about not your employer not taking the piss, basically, and expecting the earth for that and being unreasonable, but at the same time, having the balance the other way. So almost there's, I think, possibly in some organizations, a reluctance to talk about, I need this from you and you need this from me. It's usually just employer saying, I need this from you and this is what you must deliver, and people just sort of go along with it. But I think if we can increase the voices on the other side, then at least everyone's in the know, and you know whether you're going to get that or not.
It's about assertiveness, not in an aggressive way, I think, but
Mm,
it's, you know, it's being, you know, knowing your worth, understanding the value you bring, because that's why people hire you, and not being afraid to ask. I remember when I was working at Microsoft, we had this wonderful guy who was in the leadership team, and he told the CEO that he needed to leave at 3 o'clock every day
mm,
to go and pick up his kids. But he didn't ask. And what often happens is that women will be like, I'm not going to say, I'm just going to try and manage it, because we're taught to fear. But you know, his gender meant that he could just go and ask, and it was like, yeah, of course you can.
mm-hmm,
So I think there is a meeting in the middle that has to happen.
mm,
There's lots of articles that talk about the mental load, and you know, part of the reason we put the core model in place was so that actually people who had other caring responsibilities, other things going on, didn't have to worry about the mental load, didn't have to worry about dashing off and then coming back or what have you. They could just be and manage those parts of their lives. And I think that's, you
mm-hmm.
know, that's what we want people to come to work and bring their full selves and be authentic, and we have to enable that as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So for this year then, Sam, for Marra, what do you envisage?
Well, the focus right now is we've had our training. We've got a cohort of 15 amazing people, and it's customer acquisition. So the real focus
Mm,
on, you know, continue to grow the company from a cultural perspective and investing in our people,
mm,
but also investing in our customer relationships, landing new business, and hopefully showing how Power Platform, low code, and a focus on bringing diverse thinking into tech can help transform how organizations run their business.
yeah, absolutely. It sounds great. And I think you're on a real sort of platform for success, because
Thank you.
I speak to companies all day long, and their number one challenge is one, finding talent, but then finding the right talent as well. And unfortunately, more often than not, and it is sad that this is the case, you know, being from an underrepresented background myself, the talent finding takes precedence over what type of talent it is or where they've come from. People are so desperate for talent these days that the diversity often gets dropped, or the inclusion element gets dropped. It's like, I'll just give you what you want, and we just need to get this product out the door. And I think, you know, I do get it from a company perspective. It's tough because you know, you've got deadlines, you've got products, you've got investors and that type of thing. But if you don't start somewhere, the problem is just going to get worse and worse and worse, and it'll
You
get away from you.
100%, you are storing yourself a big problem for the future, because actually we've all seen the I mean, the decades of reports from people like McKinsey and others
Mm,
demonstrating how important diversity is, right, for the bottom line. But when we look at the Gen Zs and the millennials and the generations to come, they're going to care about who you're hiring, the diversity and your supply chain, and you need to care about it now. It's also
mm,
much harder to go back and fix a problematic piece of software that is in the market or being used, because it's
mm,
not diverse or it's got bias in it, than it is to think about it from the outset.
yeah,
So sometimes you have to slow down to go faster. And I think that, yeah, so that would just be my view on these things. I think sometimes we just got to take a step back and really think about the impact you're having short, medium, and long term as a business.
yeah, absolutely. If somebody was wanting to come and work for Marra down the line, what are, would you say, you know, the core things you're looking for in people, or the non-negotiables when you're hiring for the team at Marra that you would look for?
So I will spin that on its head. We're looking for, we don't have kind of common traits or things that we might be looking for in people, because we're looking for diversity ultimately.
Mm,
But what I look for personally, is that growth mindset, right? That kind of that curiosity around love, passion for technology. You know, I think it's important that if you're going to come work in an industry, whatever that might be, that you're interested in it and your
mm,
willingness to learn. And I think that learner mindset, and that kind of growth mindset is really important, because if you're career changing,
mm,
or if you're embarking on something new, you're going to be right at the bottom of that sort of rung, of that ladder, and it's going to feel a bit hard. And so you're
mm,
going to have to be super resilient. And that's where the growth mindset comes from, and that embracing of
mm.
change. But yeah, we welcome everybody. Unfortunately, we did some insights discovery training last week, and fortunately, most people don't look like me, so or sound like me. So but it's great that I don't want to hire people in my shadow. It's the worst thing that a leader can do. I need to hire people that work as a team and bring.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked briefly earlier, Sam, about mentors. A lot of people actually don't know what a mentor is or what a mentor-mentee relationship looks like. So I suppose start us off with, have you had and worked with mentors over your career?
I have, and I've had some amazing mentors, and some of them have been transactional. So they might be somebody for me, it's about getting the job and the next job or promotion. It might be getting a job done. Some of them are long term. So I have the most amazing person in my life who's, I'd say, an infrequent mentor now, but I've known her since I was in my late 20s, and she took me from company to company. So I was part of that sort of group of people that she trusted, and I value everything she's always given me. So you will develop those relationships, but they're important to invest in, because you never know where they might take you. And it's always really important, I think, it comes back to that feedback point, to just understand where your shadow parts are, right? The bits holding you back. And it's an opportunity to learn as well. And I think they're really important, but they need to be managed, and they should be invested in by both parties.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely critical, because I think the misconception sometimes is I'll get a mentor, they'll just tell me what to do, but actually the relationship is driven by you, the mentee. You get out of it as much as you put into it, really.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's the critical thing. You have advocates, sponsors, and mentors are really the ones who can really help shape you. The sponsors will help you maybe get into the next role, but the mentors can really give that support. I think coaches are important as well. I have a wonderful coach, who I feel that I can kind of just uncover myself in, without and be vulnerable. So yeah, all those the support system. I talk about the support system, and I think everyone needs a support system around them, not just friends, but people who can give that objective, constructive view of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a female-led organization, Sam, do you find, are you still feeling the bias when you're going in, pitching, talking to clients, customers, that type of thing? Or do you think it's less so these days than it has been previously?
It's mixed. I think what I'm observing, I guess, is that diversity is not for everybody, right? That some care, some don't, and that that helps us decide whether we might want to work with the organization. I'm really keen to stand on our values, because that's kind of what we're about. So I am still talking to a lot of men. That's the reality. As you kind of get higher up, there's less women often, and I have to be aware of that, and how I kind of feel around those edges. But I have to say, in every single pitch I've done so far, the feedback has been immense, in terms of, it's about time someone did stuff. They're so glad to see someone taking action rather than talking the talk. And there's just been nothing but support, and that's come from men from all walks of life. I feel that we're at that turning point, I hope, and I talk about that kind of cultural revolution that needs to happen in tech. These people also recognize it, right? They recognize it for their families, for their daughters, their sons, and for the people that they work for.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That really is. I'll ask you some well, I call them quick fire questions. You don't need to answer them quick fire, but they're questions I ask everyone, because we get a lot of interest for these types of things on the podcast. If somebody was looking to get into the sector now for the very first time, either a young person just coming out of college or GCSEs, a tech returner, someone returning to the workforce, career changer, what would be your sort of best advice to those people?
I would so first up, I would explore what's around from a further education perspective. What's the colleges. There's some amazing colleges northeast. There's some brilliant colleges around, not just universities, but what's available there that's free. There is so much available online now, and there are so many organizations providing kind of coding and learning about technology. I would just be careful about what you're paying for and making sure that you're getting the quality out. There are also brilliant organizations like STEMETS and others where they're particularly for women are providing that kind of that entry point in. But what, LinkedIn is a really great resource, going on there, joining some groups, looking around where there might be places that you can kind of turn up to, and finding some mentors, reaching out to people. Most people want to talk about their career, they'll be happy to. So I think that do the research, figure out an area that you might be interested in, because technology is super broad. You've got anything from cybersecurity over to voice over IP or AI. It is hugely broad. So finding an area that might be a niche for you and doing some exploration, and then trying to see if you can find people that you can speak to and go and practice in. But anyone can learn to code these days. It is not the domain of those who've just gone to university. Anyone can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a critical point that I'd like to repeat about, being careful about what you're paying for as well, because some of these things aren't cheap and some of them are very good, but there is a sometimes gap between where the learning ends and where that first job begins. And that in itself, depending on your own personal situation, could be the crippling moment because you've had to fund yourself through whatever it is you've been doing and you've not been working. And, I think sometimes people set timelines in their head of this needs to work by this point, or, it's time to do something else.
Yeah, and I think there is often a gap between, and I see that actually when I was working at Microsoft with the graduates, I used to hire smart people, but what was being taught actually wasn't what the business needed. Internships provide invaluable ways into the workplace, and most people who intern, even if you offer it for free, sometimes will be hired. But I do think there is that can be a challenge. You need real experience of what it means to kind of deliver the technology. But you're right. I think that you have talk to people, find out what a boot camp might be like before you invest in it, and see what support they'll give you. So back to that mentoring and support, will they help you get interviews? Will they help sponsor you into an organization? Do they work with organizations that might be looking for talent as well, and kind of get from there?
Great advice. With your day-to-day role, how would you define success day to day? How do you know at the end of the day I've had a good day here?
Gosh, really great question. Every day is different, which I love. I genuinely love. I guess it would be at the moment probably aligned to customer conversations potentially. What they look like. Probably more importantly, it's how my team feel, right? The kind of checkpoint back in with them, watching them grow. I mean, I talk about them all the time. I'm overwhelmed by watching this group of people, and I know some of them are trained technologists, they're developers, but watching them all adopt and learn a new platform, particularly the people who've never worked in tech before. And now, there was a big milestone we had a couple of weeks ago. We did this, what we call mini project week, and they were building applications. They were acting like they'd been in tech for like 5 years. And for me, watching the growth in people and watching people believe suddenly that they can do it, and having that self-belief, that's what makes me happy at the end of every day.
Yeah, sounds great. And the final one from me, Sam. In your career, what would you say the best piece of advice you've ever received is that you'd like to share with us all?
Just one piece of advice.
Just the one.
I'm gonna do two, but they're connected, so they're kind of part of one. So be yourself, be authentically you, and also understand your impact on others. Because sometimes we can overbear, we can derail ourselves, right? When we're stressed. So really understanding how you impact others every day. Those have been very invaluable pieces of advice for me, alongside a whole host of other things. But those were the things that made me more mindful, particularly as I stepped into leadership, around how I show up and what might impact my day, and what might my impact be on people in my team. As you get higher, and I don't like this kind of concept of hierarchies, but as you get to become a CEO, people suddenly fear you, and I never want to be the person they fear ever. How your impact on others has been a big thing for me.
Great stuff. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Sam. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and learning more about Marra and the vision that you've got there.
Thank you so much.
We'll
It's been great to be on here. Thank you.
No worries at all, and we'll get links posted underneath this podcast so people can connect directly with yourself, whether you're a customer looking to work with Marra or a future recruit. By all means, reach out, and if anyone would like to ask me anything further, by all means, reach out as well. But yeah, thanks for your time, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.